Welcome to Karma Chronicles. Please like the video and subscribe. Let's begin. The smell of soy, ginger, and slow-braised pork filled every corner of the old house. I had been cooking since sunrise, moving from one counter to the next like I was rehearsing for some unspoken performance. My name is Leah Lang. I'm 37 years old, and I live in my childhood home in a small rural town, 2 hours outside Philadelphia. I'm an architect by trade, but these days, my life feels like a patchwork of compromises, mostly revolving around this house and the people inside it. This Lunar New Year was supposed to feel different. I thought if I followed Dad's old recipes, the ones he scribbled in faded notebooks before he passed, maybe it would bring a little peace to this place. I had spent the past week calling markets, hunting down the exact brand of rice wine he loved, and even driving into the city to get fresh lotus root. The kitchen counters were now lined with platters of dumplings, lacquered roast duck, and steamed fish glistening with scallions. Every dish had a purpose, a memory. Naomi hovered near the doorway, arms crossed, her dark hair falling into her eyes. She was 28 and still looked like the shy kid who used to cling to my hand at the bus stop. Lately, though, she seemed more like a guest in her own skin, jittery, withdrawn. I handed her a bowl of peeled tangerines and asked if she could set them on the table. "Sure," she mumbled, her voice thin. She wasn't much help, but I didn't push her. She had that look again, like she was bracing for something. I figured we were both nervous about Mom. Mom, Victoria Lang, had been the retired head librarian of our town, a woman whose standards were as sharp as the creases in her cardigans. Nothing I did was ever quite right, at least not anymore. Since Dad died, it was like her warmth went with him. She stayed upstairs most days, reading or watching old news clips. "Do you think she'll come down early?" Naomi asked, glancing toward the ceiling as if Mom might overhear. I shrugged, trying to hide the knot in my stomach. "She'll come when the food's ready." By 6, I had the table set with Dad's old porcelain plates and the red silk runner he loved. Naomi lit the candles. I stood there, apron covered in flour, feeling like a kid waiting for a teacher's approval. Mom finally appeared, her steps slow but deliberate. She didn't comment on the food or the table. She just sat down and unfolded her napkin. We began eating in silence, the clatter of chopsticks louder than any words. Halfway through the meal, Mom set her bowl down and looked straight at me. "Leah," she said, as casually as if she were talking about the weather, "it's time for you to move out." I froze, my chopsticks suspended midair. Naomi's mouth dropped open, but no words came. The room went so quiet I could hear the faint hiss of the radiator. "What?" I managed to whisper. Mom reached for another dumpling. "You've been here long enough. It's time you found your own place." The bite of pork in my mouth turned to ash. I had spent years holding this house together, paying the bills, keeping the lights on, and she said it like I was some unwelcome guest. Naomi stared at her plate, her fingers trembling slightly. I looked between them both, suddenly unsure if I had a home at all. I couldn't sleep. I just sat on the edge of my narrow attic bed, still wearing the same sweater I'd cooked in, staring at the peeling wallpaper that I once thought looked like a field of tiny flowers. The house was silent except for the occasional groan of the old floorboards. I kept replaying Mom's words, that flat tone as she told me to move out, like I was nothing more than a long-term guest who had overstayed my welcome. I pulled my knees up and tried to breathe slowly, but the memories kept piling up. I thought of the first winter after Dad died, when I moved back here because Mom couldn't handle the bills. I sold my little apartment near the city and brought my savings home, promising myself it was temporary, just until she found her footing. That was almost 5 years ago. 5 years of paying the mortgage, fixing the roof, replacing the water heater, and watching her thank me with silence. It hadn't always been this hard. In the beginning, I thought my effort would soften her, make her see I was doing this out of love. But every small thing became my fault. When a utility bill went missing, she scolded me like I was a careless teenager. When I laughed too loud on the phone with friends, she said I was inconsiderate. Every time Naomi's anxiety spiraled, Mom hinted that I wasn't doing enough to help. I stopped arguing. I thought if I stayed quiet and kept supporting everyone, eventually Mom would appreciate me. I rubbed my temples, trying to push away the exhaustion that felt like a second skin. What did I even get out of all this? I hadn't dated in years. My career had stalled because I'd turned down out-of-state offers to stay close to home. And still, I was the one being told to leave. Around 2 in the morning, I went downstairs and found the tangerine tart I'd made, untouched on the counter. I ran my hand over the smooth ceramic plate. Dad loved that tart. He used to say the sweetness made the new year feel lucky. Now, it just looked like another effort wasted. By dawn, I'd made my decision. There was no dramatic speech, no confrontation. I just packed one small suitcase, a few work clothes, my sketchbook, the mug I'd bought in college. I slipped my house key onto the table next to the tart. Naomi's bedroom door was closed. I thought about leaving a note but decided against it. Maybe silence was the only language this house understood. When I stepped outside, the air was sharp with frost. I stood there for a moment, watching my breath curl in the pale morning light. Then I walked down the gravel driveway, suitcase rolling behind me, the weight of the house finally off my shoulders. By the time I reached the city, my hands were stiff from gripping the steering wheel. I didn't have a plan, just the address of someone who had once told me, "You're always welcome here." Julian. We'd worked together at a design firm years ago, back when I still believed I could build a life that was mine alone. Now he taught drafting at a trade college and lived in a modest walk-up near the river. I parked outside his building and sat there for a few minutes, staring at the faded brick facade. Showing up unannounced felt like crossing some line, but I had nowhere else to go. When I finally knocked, he opened the door with that same easy smile I remembered. His dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and he smelled faintly of sandalwood and coffee. "Leah," he said, not even waiting for me to explain. "Come in. You look like you've been through it." I stepped inside, trying to hold myself together. His apartment was small but warm, mismatched cups on the kitchen counter, incense burning on a windowsill, the soft hum of a radiator filling the silence. It wasn't polished or perfect, but it felt lived in, safe. That safety broke something loose in me. Before I could say a word, I started crying. Ugly, silent sobs that felt like they'd been locked in my chest for years. Julian didn't ask questions. He just handed me a tissue and put a mug of oolong tea in front of me. "Stay as long as you need," he said, sliding a spare set of keys across the table as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I nodded, unable to speak. That night, I slept on his couch with an extra blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. For the first time in years, I didn't dream about bills or broken conversations with my mother. I woke up to the sound of Julian making coffee and humming to himself, and for a brief moment, I felt like I could breathe. The next day, he asked, "What's next for you?" I didn't have an answer. I spent hours scrolling through rental listings, trying to imagine a place that wasn't filled with ghosts. On the third day, I found it, a tiny studio across the river, on the top floor of an old walk-up building. The photos showed chipped paint and uneven floorboards, but something about it called to me. It wasn't much, but it would be mine. Julian offered to drive me over to see it. The landlord was an older woman who kept saying, "It's nothing fancy, but it's honest." I signed the lease that afternoon, my hand shaking as I wrote my name. It felt like a promise I was making to myself that I would no longer live waiting for someone else's approval. When I moved in with just my suitcase and a box of kitchen basics, Julian carried the heavier items up the narrow stairs. "Not bad," he said, setting my small lamp on the windowsill. The sunlight caught on the scuffed floorboards, and for the first time, I felt something close to hope. 3 days into my new routine, I was still unpacking the scattered pieces of my life, folding clothes into the narrow dresser, trying to make the studio feel less like a temporary shelter and more like a choice. I was rinsing a chipped mug when my phone buzzed. It was Naomi. "You won't believe what Mom's telling people." I frowned and called her immediately. "What do you mean?" Naomi's voice was low, as if she didn't want anyone to overhear. "She's been on the phone with Aunt Carol, Uncle Pete, everyone. She says you screamed at her, threw the food, and stormed out on New Year's night. She's painting you as unhinged, Leah." I stared at the mug in my hand, the water still running. "What?" I didn't even raise my voice. "I know," Naomi said quickly. "I told her to stop, but you know how she is. She makes herself sound like the wounded party, and everyone eats it up." I sat down on the edge of my bed, the truth hitting me in layers. If Mom's story was the only one being told, it wouldn't be long before the family believed it completely. They already had their favorites and scapegoats. I didn't stand a chance. By that evening, I noticed subtle signs. Cousin Rory unfollowed me on social media. A family group chat I'd been in for years quietly removed me. No one asked my side, no one called. It was as if Mom's version had already become fact. That night, I opened my laptop and stared at a blank document. I wasn't planning to fight with her or beg for anyone to take my side, but I couldn't let her version of events be the only record. I needed something, even just a few sentences, that said, "This is what really happened. Not for them, but for me." I typed a few lines, deleted them, typed again. It felt impossible to condense 5 years of sacrifices into words that didn't sound bitter or self-pitying. I thought about every bill I'd paid, every late-night worry, every time I swallowed my own needs because I was told family came first. And yet, the moment I left quietly, I became the villain. I wrote until past midnight, then deleted the entire thing. The next day, I tried again, and again. By the third day, I had half a page that felt like something real. I didn't name names or drag anyone, I just told my story the way it happened. The quiet departure, the years of silence that preceded it, the final push that broke me. I saved the draft and sat back staring at the screen. My hands were shaking, but my chest felt lighter. I wasn't ready to post it yet, but I knew I would. Because if I didn't claim my own truth, it would be erased completely. On the third morning, I stopped overthinking and pressed publish. The night before, I had gone through the draft at least a dozen times, pruning every sentence that felt like an accusation. No names, no direct quotes. Just the truth, simple and spare. I wrote about the 5 years I spent paying the bills and holding the house together, hoping for gratitude that never came. I wrote about leaving in silence, not anger, and how that silence was now being used against me. I ended with a single line. I just needed this truth to exist somewhere. When I hit the button, I felt both lighter and nauseous. My blog was barely read by anyone, just a dusty corner of the internet where I once shared design sketches and vacation photos. I copied the link and posted it to my social media. Then I shut my laptop, tucked my knees under a blanket, and tried not to think about who might read it. For hours, nothing happened. No messages, no likes. The silence felt heavy, like waiting for a storm that might never arrive. Around noon, I walked to the corner coffee shop, trying to distract myself with the sound of espresso machines and clinking cups. By the time I returned, my phone had a few notifications. Not from the people I expected, no cousins defending me, no old friends rushing to argue, just a quiet handful of messages. Aunt Lena had written a single line. She's always rewritten things. But this time, someone said it out loud. Thank you. I stared at her words for a long time, realizing how rarely anyone in the family ever acknowledged what they saw. I typed back a simple, thank you, and left it at that. Later, I saw a message from Rory, my cousin who'd quietly unfollowed me the day before. I'm sorry, I didn't know the full story. That was all. No excuses, just that. It made my chest ache in a way I couldn't explain, like I'd been holding my breath for years. A couple of old colleagues from the design firm also reached out. I remember how much you did for them, one wrote. I always thought you deserved more credit. I didn't know what to say, so I just sent back a heart emoji, the smallest way of saying, I hear you. By nightfall, I realized something strange. I didn't care if the post went viral within the family. I didn't want a showdown or a round of phone calls. It wasn't about changing their minds. It was just about putting the truth outside of me, where it couldn't be bent or denied. I left the post up and closed my laptop. For the first time since leaving home, I slept through the night. No dreams, no replay of old arguments. Just quiet. In the days after I posted my story, I didn't expect much. Maybe a few polite messages, or none at all. But slowly, something shifted. My phone buzzed here and there, not with arguments or family drama, but with quiet, unexpected voices. Cousin Rory sent a short text the next morning. We always knew she treated you unfairly. He didn't explain or offer excuses, and I didn't ask for them. Just reading those words made me pause. It was the first time someone in the family had ever admitted what I'd felt all along. Aunt Lena called later that day. I'm proud of you, she said softly, her voice like a whisper of solidarity. Your mom? Well, she's always been like that. But I think you were the first to say out loud what many of us already saw. I thanked her, though my throat tightened as I said it. I wasn't used to being believed. Other small gestures followed. An old colleague from the firm sent me a message saying, your strength shows. I remember how often you took care of everyone else. A former neighbor I hadn't spoken to in years left a quiet comment on my post. You're brave for walking away. None of it was loud. There were no long, dramatic confessions or apologies from the people who had hurt me, but the little affirmations began to pile up like pebbles on a shoreline, steadying me. I realized I didn't need the whole family to agree with me. I just needed to feel that my memory of what happened wasn't some distorted story I'd made up in my head. In my studio, I began to find small routines that felt like new beginnings. I bought 2 plants from a corner shop and placed them near the window. I played soft music in the mornings while making tea. letting the sound fill the space instead of old arguments. I pinned a few sketches to the wall, nothing special, just little drawings that reminded me of who I was before I gave so much of myself away. One night, as I watered my plants and looked at the scattered notes on my desk, I felt a strange, gentle clarity. I wasn't waiting for anyone's approval anymore. I wasn't carrying the weight of trying to fix something that had been broken long before I returned to that house. The post wasn't revenge. It wasn't even meant for the family who turned their backs. It was just my truth, standing quietly in the light. And that, I realized, was enough. I went to bed with my windows open, the hum of city life mixing with the faint rustle of leaves outside. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a life that belonged only to me. Naomi texted one Saturday morning, "Can we meet? Just us." Her tone, even in writing, felt heavy. We agreed on a small tea house downtown, the kind with steamed windows and mismatched chairs. I arrived first, ordered jasmine tea, and tried to ignore the nervous tapping of my foot. When Naomi walked in, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was messy, her eyes ringed with shadows. She sat across from me and didn't bother with small talk. "It's worse," she said, voice soft but raw. "The house feels like it's shrinking." I let her talk. She told me about missed bills piling up, Mom's mood swinging from icy silence to cutting remarks. Naomi admitted she'd been staying in her room most nights, pretending to sleep just to avoid the tension. "I used to think you exaggerated," she said, wrapping her hands around her tea. "I thought maybe you were too sensitive, but now—" She trailed off, shaking her head. "I see it. I see how she talks to me when she's frustrated, how she blames me for everything. It's the same way she treated you." I didn't say I told you so. I just nodded and sipped my tea, giving her space to put words to what she'd been avoiding. Naomi's lip trembled slightly. "I can't do it anymore. I'm not as strong as you. I don't know how you lasted this long." "I didn't feel strong," I said. "I just kept hoping something would change." She stared into her cup like it might give her answers. "When you left, I thought you abandoned me, but I get it now. You were saving yourself." The honesty in her voice cut deep. I reached across the table, resting my hand over hers. "I can't give you money, Naomi, not this time. But when you're ready to leave, I'll help you figure it out. I'll help you pack. I'll come get you if you need me." She nodded, tears gathering in the corners of her eyes. "I'm scared," she whispered. "I was too," I said. "But the fear fades once you're on the other side of the door." We sat in silence for a while, the jasmine tea cooling between us. It wasn't a neat, fixed conversation. There was no sudden healing, but something shifted. For the first time in years, we felt like sisters instead of co-survivors in the same storm. When we left the tea house, the cold air hit us at the same moment. Naomi slipped her arm through mine like she used to when we were kids walking to school. We didn't talk about Mom. We didn't talk about the past. We just walked side by side, knowing we finally saw the same truth. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon when I heard the knock. At first, I thought it was a delivery, but when I looked through the peephole, I saw her. Mom holding a flimsy plastic cake box like a peace offering. My chest tightened. I hadn't seen her since that New Year's night. When I opened the door a crack, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Maybe we can talk," she said, lifting the cake slightly. It was one of those store-bought things, still in its clear dome. "Things haven't been the same since you left." I stood in the doorway, blocking her view of the apartment behind me. "Are you here to apologize?" I asked. My voice was calm, but my pulse was sharp and fast. Her smile faltered. "We both made mistakes," she said. She said it like a fact, like we were splitting blame down the middle, as if years of silence and criticism were equal to me quietly walking away. I realized then that she wasn't here to make amends. She was here to reset the narrative, to smooth things over without ever admitting what she'd done. It was the same balancing act I'd grown up with, where she stood in the middle, above the conflict, pretending to be the only one with reason. "No," I said softly. "I can't do this anymore." Her brow furrowed. "Leah, don't be dramatic. I'm trying to fix things." I glanced at the cake, its bright frosting spelling out, "Thinking of you," in sloppy red letters. It felt like a prop. "Fixing things starts with acknowledging what's broken," I said. "And I don't think you can do that." She sighed, the kind of weary sigh that always made me feel like a burden. "You've changed," she said, shaking her head. "Maybe I have," I answered. "I wish you well, Mom, but I can't let you in." My hand rested on the door, steady. For a moment, she just stared at me, like she didn't quite believe I meant it. But when I didn't move, she pressed her lips together, her eyes going cold. Fine, she muttered. I nodded once and closed the door. No slam, no anger, just a quiet finality. Through the peephole, I watched her stand there a moment longer, still holding the cake box like she didn't know what to do with it. Then she turned and walked down the hall, her figure shrinking with each step. Inside, I sat on the floor by the door, listening to my own heartbeat. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The boundary had been drawn, and this time, I wasn't moving it. Months later, the air in my apartment felt different, lighter, warmer, carrying the faint scent of sandalwood incense and something simmering on the stove. The place no longer looked like a temporary shelter. A patchwork rug lay across the old floorboards, softening their creak. A few framed sketches leaned against the wall, waiting for hooks. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and I'd stopped apologizing for how I lived. I had built new rhythms here, morning tea on the windowsill while the sun crawled across the river. Music playing low in the background. Anything from acoustic folk to soft jazz, depending on the day. Sometimes I'd leave it on even when I wasn't home, just so the space always felt alive when I returned. Naomi started visiting on weekends. She'd take the train into the city, a little more tired each time, but also more certain. We'd walk to the corner market together, her asking about the strange tea blends I'd been trying, me listening as she vented about the tension at home. She never asked for money, and I didn't offer, but I made her tea and let her rest. One Saturday, she stood by the window, watching the traffic crawl along the bridge. I've been saving up, she said quietly. Not much yet, but I'm thinking about moving out by the end of summer. I smiled. You don't have to rush, but when you're ready, I'll help you pack, just like I promised. She turned to me, her expression softening. It's strange, but I feel braver just knowing you're here. Not back at the house, but here, living your life. We didn't talk about Mom anymore. There was no point. Whatever story she was telling now, it wasn't ours to correct. My blog post remained up, untouched, quietly sitting where I'd left it. I never added to it or defended it. It wasn't about winning an argument. It was about recording what happened so I could stop carrying the whole weight of it. Sometimes I'd glance at the comments people had left, small, quiet acknowledgments from family and friends. We see you. We believe you. I didn't need more than that. On evenings when Naomi stayed over, we'd sit on the floor by the windows with cups of green tea and talk about everything but the past. Books we'd read, people we used to know, plans we hadn't dared to say out loud. We laughed in a way that felt different from before, lighter, almost like it belonged to us alone. I'd catch myself looking around my studio, the mismatched cups on the shelf, the potted plants leaning toward the light, and realize I no longer felt like a visitor in my own life. This was my home. This was my space. The truth I'd written months ago didn't need to be defended anymore. It lived quietly, just as I did now. And for the first time in years, that was enough.